Kunzang Choden, welcome viewers. Asian Literary Society celebrates the special event Caravan Bhutan with the aim to promote the rich heritage of Bhutan. This evening, we are glad to have in our midst on the forum three distinguished guests, a very eminent writer and a distinguished personality, Madam Kunzang Choden, founder and executive director of Bhutan Toilet Organization, Mr. Chablop Passu, and eminent journalist and poet, Mr. Gopilal Acharya. Let us introduce all to our eminent guests for panel discussion. Madam Kunzang Choden did her schooling in Senior Cambridge Loreto Convent, Darjeeling. She did graduation with honors in psychology from Delhi University in the year 1976. In 1987, she did graduation in sociology from University of Nebraska in USA. She started her career as a teacher and thereafter head teacher in JAACL Junior High School, Bhutan. Since 2012, Madam Choden is the founder and CEO of Young Books. Again, since 2012, she is an executive trustee in Ogyen Choling Foundation and curator of Ogyen Choling Museum. She also has work experience for 3 years as a festival co-director of Mountain Echoes Literary Festival. In 1996-97, she worked as a researcher for the Gender, Environment, and Sustainable Livelihood Livelihood Project executed by International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. In 1988-90, she worked as National Program Officer in United Nations Development Program, THIMPU, which is responsible for all UNDP projects in the social sector and projects under the United Nations Development Fund for Women, the United Nations Population Fund, and United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. In 1985-87, she was a resource person for Nebraska in the World, a Women in Development project with funding from Biden-Pell. She also served in Center for Bhutan Studies, Loden Foundation, Bhutan Non-Foundation, Bhutan Narcotics Control Authority, University Council, Royal University, Bhutan. She has a long list of published works. To mention a few, Folk Tales of Bhutan, which was published by White Lotus, Bangkok. Bhutanese Tales of the Yeti, published by White Lotus, Bangkok. The Circle of Karma, which is a novel published by Juban and Penguin, New Delhi. Chili and Cheese, Food and Society in Bhutan, published by White Lotus, Bangkok, and many more. She has a list of illustrated children's books. To name a few, Room in Your Heart, a folk tale from Bhutan, which is published by Juban, New Delhi. Then there's another one, Auntie Mouse, a folk tale from Bhutan, which is again published by Juban, New Delhi. Guru Rinpoche is Coming, which is published by Young Books, Thimphu. And there's another one, Shego, the Garment of Life. Shego, the Garment of Life, which is published by Young Books. 2 of her books are in press. One is Monk Chasing Monkey, which is a novel going to be published by Young Books, Thimphu. Another one is Ashi Shoman, The Man-Made Princess, which is again going to be published by Young Books, Thimphu. Friends, we'll get to hear more on the panel discussion from the eminent writer soon. Let me introduce you to Mr. Chablop Passu, who is more popularly known as Chablop Passu. He is the founder and executive director of Bhutan Toilet Organization since 2014. Since 2017, he is the board director of Bhutan Trust Fund for Environment Conservation. He was appointed as a social media monitor by Election Commission of Bhutan during 2013 parliamentary election and 2016 in local government election. He is a B.Ed both in mathematics and information and communication technology. He is a freelance columnist with Business Bhutan and the Bhutanese. He is the contributor for Students Digest, Youth Digest, Bhutan Center for Media and Democracy. He started his work as a teacher in Bajothang High School, Wangju, and later on, he was handpicked by His Majesty, the King, for the prestigious Royal Academy. Chablop Passu delivered speeches on various topics like social media for young leaders in Children's Parliament of Bhutan, social media revolution in Bloggers Conference, future of blogging in Royal Thimphu College, use and abuse of social media in youth camp in Pelkil School, use and abuse of social media in Yeso Zerling High School, and toilet culture in Bhutan, in Bhutanese Writers Retreat, blogging in Bhutan, a new perspective on Bhutan, La Meridie Riverfront, social media and creativity in education in Institute of Education Development. Mr. Pasing Shering is a blogger since 2006. He's a founder in B-Bay and a co-founder in Writer Association of Bhutan and Community of Bhutanese Bloggers. Welcome, sir. Our next distinguished guest, Mr. Gopilal Acharya. He was born in Galephu, Bhutan in the year 1978 and educated in Bhutan as well as in Sweden. He is the author of Bhutanese folk tales entitled From the South and the East and a collection of poems, Dancing to Death. The manuscript of his debut novel, With a Stone in My Heart, was long listed for the Man Asian Literary Prize 2009. His poems have appeared in a number of international anthologies, including The Quest, Blossoms, and Rustling Breeze. His poems are also printed in the textbooks and taught in graduation and post-graduation levels in Bhutan. Mr. Acharya is an award-winning writer-journalist. He worked as chief editor of Bhutan's first language. His book, Byline, is an outstanding body of journalistic work. Welcome, sir. Welcome on the panel. I think there's some connectivity problem with Madam Choden. Can you hear me?
Did we lose her? Oh, I think she's back.
Yeah, she has come.
It's crackling. Bend down and go.
So, ma'am, can we start a discussion? Ma'am, you wrote on various kinds of themes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It's cracking, but
can you hear me? Okay.
It's not very clear.
Okay, anyone can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, but sometimes it cracks. The network is really bad. I don't know which side it is.
Yeah, probably. So should I, ma'am, can you hear me? Should I start with you? Or is it difficult for you?
Try, but it's not very clear.
Okay.
There's some disturbance.
Okay, Bishakha, speak slowly the question. Just ask the question slowly, okay?
Yes. Ma'am, you have written on various themes. You have, while you dwelt on your writings, you have written from folk tales to food. You have written on various themes. So does your writing reflect a blend of both traditional and contemporary themes? Does your writing reflect both traditional and contemporary themes?
Yes. Yes, I try to incorporate the traditional with the contemporary. And of course, my folk stories are all traditional stories. Food, the book on food is, I'm looking at the contemporary situation, but going back into what the traditional was. So it's kind of a journey, my personal journey of the changing food habits, what it used to be and what it has now become. And what the folk stories, the little children's stories that I write, I always try to base on the traditional themes and bring it into the lives of the children today. So it's kind of a link to try and link, let the children have a view of what their past was and how it can be brought into their contemporary lives.
Okay, wonderful. Because traditional themes are only based on religious teachings and rich biographies. The traditional
Sorry,
themes.
I cannot hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, traditional themes of literature are based probably on religious teachings and rich biographies. Biography.
No, mine is mostly based on oral traditions. Of course, there's always some influence from the religion, but it's mostly stories as told by the folk, the common people. So I am not dabbling in religion or trying to bring morals into my stories, but telling the stories as it was told in the oral society by the elders to the children. So it's much more the folk level, the religious. Not so much the religious, but I cannot rule out religion because I'm sure religion had an influence.
And the life of people, of course, in Bhutan, probably. Fantastic, man. Wonderful. Wonderful. One more question to Mr. Fasin Sherry. Sir, Bhutan is unique in its environmental conservation. Bhutan is unique in its environmental conservation, and without proper sanitation facilities, waste from infected individuals can contaminate, land and water, and increase the rise of infection for other individuals. You have, sir, provided clean toilet for every Bhutanese, being a founder and executive director of Bhutan Toilet Organization. Would you speak about the toilet culture in Bhutan? It's mute. So it's mute. Please unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you for having us, and I'm so honored to be put alongside two of my idols, author Kunzang Choden, and my teacher and my writing inspiration, Gopilal. Dr. Bishakha, I think you asked me my favorite question because I keep a lot of interest, but the toilet matters has been one of my favorite these days. So when you asked me about this, I must tell you that even though we see toilet problems, sanitation problem as a big issue right now, going back a few centuries, we didn't have that problem. We dealt with that very organically. You should read some of my articles about how toilets were back then. Where we could manage it so well in a very traditional way. No water, no toilet paper, and no ceramic pots. It was very rustic but well managed. Problems started very recently in 80s and 90s when the towns started happening and when people started moving to a very concentrated place, and then then we were also adopting new styles of toilet, where we need a flush and everything. Then suddenly our old habits didn't match with the new toilet technology. That's when the problem started. And for next 2 decades, this problem actually went from bad to worse. And then maybe 5 years ago, I and a huge group of volunteers, we stood up and said, let's do something about it. And then we started changing a lot of things, and we are at the beginning of the journey. So we have a long way ahead of us, but we can already see a lot of changes. So we are hopeful that things will change in terms of how Bhutanese will now deal with the modern toilets. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Great job. Mr. Acharya, sir, you are one of the finest journalists in Bhutan. Your book, Byline, is a body of journalistic work. Please tell us about the trend of journalism in Bhutan and your creative nonfiction works, particularly on the contents.
Thank you for having me on the forum with our inspirational literary figure, Kunzang, and also my friend and my student, one-time student, Chablop Passu. Everything in Bhutan is very new. In fact, whether you talk of modern literary tradition, whether you talk of journalism, whether you talk of the toilet habits, modern toilet habits.
Yeah.
The country itself, is fairly new in terms of progress in modern development. We started in 1961, the idea of modern development. Obviously, a lot has been achieved in the last 60, 70 years. And journalism obviously has been a very new phenomenon. In fact, the first newspaper in Bhutan, as a proper newspaper, was started in 1986. If you see Quinsel, which is Bhutan's national newspaper, came in its current form only in 1986. Although a bulletin was started by the Bhutanese Information Department in 1974, but as a true newspaper, it took another 10 years. And so from 1986 onwards, we have had the newspaper. Then, of course, we have had the radio. Radio in Bhutan, of course, was started by a youth group again. A radio, National Youth Association of Bhutan started the radio, ham radio. I'm not sure about the year, but that was also in early 80s, which later on, was developed into the current broadcaster, that is Bhutan Broadcasting Service, BBS. And later on, in 1992, with a royal command from the king, the fourth king, His Majesty Missing Wangchu, this newspaper and
just let's wait. Let's wait for a few minutes. Yes.
Am I back? Yeah. Sorry, something went wrong. It just switched itself off.
That's all right.
Yeah. So in 1992, the media was made independent, and obviously, as Bhutan prepared for democracy, in 2005, His Majesty again proposed that we have private media in Bhutan. Then in 2006, we started with a private newspaper, and I was the editor of one of the first English language newspapers. then we had a host of newspapers and radio stations that came up, as part of the whole, the fourth arm or the fourth estate. And journalism for a number of years. Of course, today it's not what it used to be, in the beginning. That's 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, I think 4, 5 years. Very robust media. Over the years, what happened was the media trend itself, with too many newspapers and media houses, I think it became a little unsustainable. Financing was an issue. So a lot of, some of these media houses, especially newspapers and radio stations, they kind of, they closed, they folded up. So what we have today is a young industry, a very young industry, with a lot of young reporters, very energetic young reporters. The industry itself is fairly new, fairly young. But I think we are maturing, as an industry. Unfortunately, a lot of senior reporters like myself, we have left the mainstream industry, mainstream media. We work as freelancers, and also we work in other areas, So what has happened is the media industry has continued to remain little young, you see, because of the senior people leaving the industry. And of course, journalism is very important to society. I guess India is a perfect example where journalism has played a big role in terms of, playing the check and balance, the role of check and balance as part of the civil society organization, as, by giving platform to the people to raise their voices. So in Bhutan, media plays the same role. We have people coming to, raise their voice and participating in all this idea of democracy by making themselves heard through media, whether TV or newspapers or radio, you see. And personally, I've been very engaged with the media industry, especially, when we were transiting from, making the transition from, absolute monarchy to, to democratic monarchy, So, yes, my latest book has a lot of articles about, various themes, including themes like India-Bhutan relationship, things like the role of monarchy in a democracy, things like education and youth. So this book captures a lot of, a lot of changes that has been happening in the last 15 years from different perspectives. I have articles on Bhutanese culture, tradition, some aspects of our culture and tradition. Articles on, my travels around the country, my own observations. And I think journalism, gives a wonderful platform for us to practice, not just to tell stories, but also to practice writing, as a vocation. So, that's the status, I would say, of media industry in Bhutan.
Let's wait for a minute. I think she has got disconnected. In meantime, Kunjang, can you tell a little bit about your literary journey? Ma'am, can you tell a little bit about your literary journey?
Sorry.
Ma'am, can you tell us about your literary journey so far? A bit about that. In meantime, when Bishakha is joining.
Okay. Are you asking me?
Yeah,
or?
I am asking to you.
Okay. Okay. My how do I say? I've always enjoyed writing. Even in school, I wrote in college. Throughout, I wrote. I always kept journals, and then I realized that there was a lot of books that had influence on our younger generation, books and stories that originated in countries outside Bhutan. And I felt there was disconnect between our youth, our young readers, and our own stories, which were not available in books. So the first book that I wrote was a compilation of the folk stories that I had heard as a child growing up in the 1950s and 60s. And I put all the stories I had heard together in my childhood and put it together. And I found a publisher, and it got published in Thailand. And I was very encouraged by the responses I got from other readers, and especially from the children. And that was the beginning of my writing. And that was followed up by the second book was specifically on the Yetis, the abominable snowman,
Yes.
because a lot of people who read the book said you left out the stories of one of our most iconic characters in the mountains, which is the Yeti. So that book was the result of me actually going and asking people to tell stories about the Yeti. So that was the second book. And then, of course, one thing led to the other. And finally, I tried, because I was very moved, or I was very conscious of women's stories, and that is that was not really covered. And I wrote a fiction, a novel, which was the life of a woman in kind of changing Bhutan. And Dr. Bishakha had asked me about whether it's whether my stories are traditional or how they relate to contemporary. And through this book, I could take a young woman who came from a very traditional, rural kind of a setting, and I used the metaphor of the road. And because one of the most important developments in Bhutan, which was actually the ushering in the development in Bhutan, was the roads, because to be connected, the roads were the most important. So actually she works and travels along the road, working as a laborer there, but goes into her life, goes into, she grows and matures, and she's looking for something. And then she also travels to India and she finds herself. So I think it is the story of one woman, but I think it is also in many ways the stories of many women in Bhutan. So, I mean, at different levels and different capacities. So that was one of the books that I wrote, which Dr. Bishakha mentioned as being published by Penguin. And then from there, I got a lot of encouragement and I really enjoyed writing. So it just led on and I began to write on different topics. And then I went back to my original theme of writing for children, because I think if you don't have a foundation, because writing and reading was quite new for Bhutan, so we came from an oral society, and if we were losing all our stories because we were seduced or we were captivated by the stories from other countries, we were losing a whole chunk or an aspect of a big, very important aspect of our society. So I consciously decided to write for children, not only for that, but also to illustrate them with artists, Bhutanese artists, and so that the children could connect. And that's what I enjoy doing the most. So that's what I'm doing these days also, writing for children based on Bhutanese folklore, Bhutanese beliefs, and creating stories for children.
Okay, ma'am. Bishakha ji, I asked ma'am about her literary journey. You may continue
Yes,
now.
I got it. Yes. I will ask again to Mr. Passu. Sir, you are a co-founder in Writers Association of Bhutan. You are a co-founder in Writers Association of Bhutan, How do you promote and archive Bhutanese literature?
Is that it? Yeah.
Yes. How do you promote and
I hope
archive
I'm audible.
Bhutanese literature?
um, uh, Writers Association of Bhutan is actually a very informal group because not that we want to keep it informal. We actually worked so many years to make it very formal and do his targeted tasks. But because of the hardship in bringing people together, we could not do it. And my co-founder, my friend Ngong Pinso, now he's gone to Australia to do his masters. So actually, because I'm busy with toilet, I wanted him to take this forward, maybe register it as a CSO, and then because until we register it as a very legit legal body, it's difficult to push things forward. Now, the whole idea behind this is like it's like author like Ashu Kunzang here. They are prodigy, they happen,
Yes.
there were no examples. She had nobody to follow in Bhutan as an example. But she just happened, is a blessing. And because of her, many authors happened after that. And in order for us to organize and produce good authors, we need to have a body which will formalize that. And you may not know the situation in Bhutan. It's a very good, Bhutan is a very, I don't know what to say, but books don't sell well here. So nobody can become a full-time writer here. Even eminent authors like Kunzang here, cannot proudly say that she has sold 100,000 books. It's in a few thousands. So therefore, nobody can become a full-time writer. We do not have dedicated book publishers, until again, author Kunzang herself started equivalent of Penguin here, Riang books. So we do not have. Otherwise, we just have printers who prints a calendar, diary, and then books, guidebooks all together. So there is, we lack this whole culture or society of authors, readers, publisher, critic, those things that we hear about in movies and from other countries. We do not have this here. So it was a young man's, when I was younger, I grew up with the dream of becoming an author. But then I grew up and then found out that this is not going to happen here. So it's so disappointing. Then I also found out that I'm not a hardcore writer artist. I can do with both sides. I'm a technical person also, and I'm an artist also. So I can handle two things together. Because if I'm a hardcore artist, whether there is a reader or not, I'll say, I want to write my stories and publish it, no matter who reads. They are, hardcore artist. But I'm not like that. I wanted to create if there is no market, I want to do something to create that market. If there is no system, I want to help in bringing that system up. So that's how we organized some young people and then tried to start an association. It didn't happen. And idea was to, get wisdom from authors like Kunzang, then contemporary like Tasho Karma Ura in Bhutan, Sonam Kinga, Sir Gopi, who has also done folk tales long time ago, even when we were in high school, he has done his book. So we wanted to bring their wisdom, then let them help us, and then create this society and bring all these young people, and maybe one day we send some books, young authors to maybe, Nobel Literature Award, because this is where. But as of now, I must tell you that we are halfway into it. And because I couldn't do a Writers Association as I wished, I'm now focusing on my next project called The Bookness, where individual can actually work on this project, which I might talk later if I get time. For now,
Sure, sure,
I'll keep this.
sure. Mr. Acharya, I believe that art is an image, a reflection of a society. And imagination in art also reflects liberty. So I want to ask you about how is traditional art different from modern art? Because so far as I've seen, Bhutanese traditional art represents religious connection and bright colors. So would you please tell me, how is traditional art different from modern art, if it is so?
In the Bhutanese context?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, you know, Bhutan for a long time, we are a very religious society, you see. Buddhism is at the heart of, you know, Bhutanese life style. Our aspect of life, everything revolves around the idea of, revolves around concepts of Buddhism. That's why even the art form in Bhutan initially originated from monastic institutions. You see, in terms of Thangka paintings that you'd have seen, the applique paintings, in terms of religious mural, right? So if you look at Bhutan's traditional art form, I'm talking about in terms of art as painted work, revolved around religious artwork. Mainly, you'll see a lot of artwork depicting our religious teachers, deities, and you'll see ideas, the religious ideas of heaven and hell, human life, ideas of justice. All these are depicted in the art form. Even in terms of our, Bhutan is very well known for its mosque dances, which again revolve around the whole idea of Buddhist, rich Buddhist teachings and traditions. That's why for a very long time, like one of my friends, I think, recently said, our art galleries were our temples, not museums, you see. And for the first time, I think it was in 2003, we had a national exhibition of our traditional paintings, Thangkas, in Paro, in the museum. It was curated by, at that time, the museum director, I think, Kempo Punsataship. And, that is where it came, especially the art form in terms of paintings. In terms of dances, I told you again, it again revolves around. But then we did have folk dances, folk songs, celebrating human life, celebrating our, ordinary trials and tribulations of ordinary, Bhutanese. But on the other hand, if you're talking about, art as vocation, as as way of in terms of creation of life related objects, then we had we have what we call the 13 traditional arts and crafts, we call Zorik Susum. It includes all the main aspects of our life. That includes masonry, that includes bricklaying, sculpting, and all these important crafts which contributed to our our living. You see, by creating things that we needed. It helped us to be good carpenters, good bricklayers, good painters. Good metal smiths. So these are the main bodies of traditional art in Bhutan, I would say. The mural, the monastic paintings, our folk dances, folk tradition, and also, the traditional arts and crafts. Uh, Obviously, literature again revolved around the biographies of our saints, biographies of our teachers, Buddhist masters. That formed the body of written literature, mostly the biographies of our, Buddhist teachers and saints, which we were taught in schools and colleges, by the way. And then, you know, like I said earlier, as modern education system started, we had pioneering people like Madam Kunzang, who took onto, modernize literature by first capturing the traditional knowledge in the form of, folk tales, in the form of, the tales of the Yeti, Obviously, then we followed the younger generation, like me and Passu. We also took inspiration and started documenting our oral literature into written format. And I think then that was the start. As we progressed, I guess we became more confident. We started exploring the idea of what it means to, write in Bhutan by exploring, modern lives. So that's why you see now a lot of, young people writing fairly, modern stories about human interactions, about love, about growing up. I think she's not here, but Chadar Wangmo has written about a mother in one of her first novels, right? Okay. So we do have modern works coming up, and a lot of young people are writing nowadays. Poetry deserves a special mention because in Bhutan, I think everybody is a born poet.
Yeah.
Everybody pens poems at one time of their lives. Yeah, so that's been the journey of from traditional to modern. But I must tell you that in terms of the artwork, if you look at VAST, that is the Voluntary Art Studio of Thimphu, that really propelled modern art, helped progress modern art. You see that a lot of artists are influenced by our traditional roots. If you look at the paintings of one of our most popular painters, Ajay Kama, distinctly Buddhist, but with very modern, concepts. So the root, the foundation continues to be our religious, our monastic, our spiritual tradition. And I think we are giving modern, interpretation to our roots now. So that's where, I think the continuation of, tradition, religious tradition continues in our modern artwork.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Madam Choden, I would like to know actually the transition from monastic to modern education. Would you tell us about that?
Most of us are very quick to say that ours was an illiterate oral society. But we had a very thriving literary society, but that was confined to the monastic, to the monasteries. So it's not that our society was without books and without, the art form of writing, because calligraphy was also very, very important. But this was confined to the monastic institutes. And all the books, I think my friends mentioned about the biographies, autobiographies, then there was philosophy, there was medicine, there was astrology, all kind of subjects were touched on and archived. You talked about archives. And if you look at the Bhutanese traditional libraries, it's amazing how much literary work was going on. But majority of the societies was an oral society. And the monks had the role of being the keepers of this written form and also the translators. That's why we have this tradition of monks going to the common people's lay houses to read. They were not only reading, but they were also translating and explaining the meanings. So we had traditions of telling stories on an everyday basis. But if you wanted to listen to a biography, or what we call namthars were the biographies of religious people, we would invite a monk who could read and come and read to the public. So that way they also had a big influence on the general public. And again, talking about the art forms, some of these stories were enacted during folk festivals, during the Chechus festivals. And again, it was the art form of dance. Gopilal touched about dance, about the making of masks. We had all these were shown or exhibited. Hello, yeah. So this way there was a link, okay. But actually, the common people, the farmers, very very small percentage. They were the bureaucrats, the courtiers, or the royal family members of the monks who could read and write. And yeah, formal literacy was introduced only in the end of 50s and 60s. So education became available, and that was really the beginning of modernization. Along with the roads I talked about, education that was different to the monastic education. In those days, education and literacy were seen as synonymous, because you learned to read and write so that you could practice religion. Okay, and even the term for going to school there was not the term for going to school, it was learning religion, and then religion and knowledge. And that with that philosophy, it was the third king who's known as who is remembered and celebrated here in Bhutan today as the father of modern Bhutan. It was during his time that education was made accessible to anyone. And that the most important thing was it was not only accessible to the boy children, as it was in the monasteries, it was made accessible to all children. And that began, and that was really the beginning of Bhutan reaching out, wanting to be connected to the rest of the world, and, really opening up the country. And that was the time when education was encouraged. And there are stories about how actually the government civil servants who are working in the education ministry actually went out and tried to convince people to go and send their children to school, break away from the monasteries. Of course, the monasteries are still thriving because they have shown that their kind of religion is also very, very useful. They are the keepers of our culture, our religious culture, our history, all the forms of art. In fact, the 13 arts and crafts that were recognized and categorized was introduced by a monk. That he was the one who recognized it. And so all this was the basis, and modern education was brought to Bhutan only in the late 50s and 60s. So now we have two parallel systems which have great influence on both. That there is the religious education where you learn to perform rituals, where you learn to chant prayers and perform the different kind of arts. And there is the modern education, that is the Western education. It began very much influenced by the Anglo-Indian system of education, because at that time it was the Anglo. That's why I had the Cambridge certificate, right? When I graduated, it was with the senior Cambridge. And now, of course, we have our own education board and our own education system, but based on the education systems that came from India, that was based at the time from the British system. So that's how the monastic education and modern education is still functioning. They're still there. And education is considered such an important, aspect of human development society, that education is free, all the way from early education right up to college level, and even advanced training, even up to PhD, if you can qualify and if you have the credit to go forward. So until now, education is not compulsory, but it is open to all.
Fantastic.
And the other important thing was that we adopted the English medium along with the Dzongkha. So again, it's the parallel system where we do the Dzongkha and the English. So the moment we go to school, we are bilinguals.
Okay.
Of course, we are already trilingual because many of us have our own languages. Dzongkha is the second language for us, but it is the national language, so we learn that. So we have our own language, the Dzongkha and English. So we already speak or familiar to 3 languages. So this is the status of our present education.
Wonderful. Thank you, madam. So I want to know that so all the Bhutanese literature are translated in Dzongkha and other languages also spoken in Bhutan. What are the languages translated?
No, it's quite complicated. We have in Bhutan, we are less than 100 million people, but we have 19 different languages. None of them are none of them are written languages. Okay, and Dzongkha is the language. Actually, it means Dzongkha, the language that was spoken in the Dzongs, the court language. So that became the language of medium of instruction, and it became a written language only in the end of 70s, and it's still in the process of growing and evolving. But all our texts, the old texts, were written in another language, which is what we call the Cheke, the language of religion. So it was never the spoken language. So it's like, I guess, a little bit like your Sanskrit. You don't speak in Sanskrit, but many of your languages came out of Sanskrit, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
the monastic education was all in this Cheke, the language of religion.
Oh, fantastic.
So you have to learn this language, and then now many are being translated into Dzongkha and English, and the biggest collection of our religious texts is 108 volumes, Tenjur, which is now being translated by under the effort of one of our best known modern young teachers, Zongsa Kensei, translated simultaneously from this archaic non-spoken language into many different languages. 108 volumes.
Wow. Wonderful. I just wondered if the language of classical Tibetan, that is Bhoti, which is spoken in Ladakh, is it similar to Dzongkha?
Well, this classical Cheke
Bhoti language
is used in, of course, it was used in Tibet. I think you're saying Ladakh. Ladakh also, they have the same test. Sikkim, I guess in Arunachal, in Tawang area, they use that because all the texts, the classical texts, are written in that language. But it's not the spoken language. That's why you can read the text and maybe you don't understand it. You can just get a gist of it, but you don't fully understand it. So then you have to learn it.
Yeah.
But Dzongkha is not like Bhoti, na? Dzongkha language is not like Bhoti. Dzongkha is not like Bhoti, which is spoken in Ladakh.
You know what? I think by Bhoti, you mean the whole range of Tibeto-Burman languages.
And the grammar and the script and everything is based on the Cheke. In fact, the grammar is also, but it's now evolving and becoming a very distinct religion.
Wonderful.
As my colleague evolving and growing, so there's quite a substantial compilation of Dzongkha text, which is literary text, which is fully in Dzongkha. And this is the language of correspondence, the official correspondence. And this language that is spoken in, now it's become it's the language that links the whole country, because everybody understands, because they learn it in the school.
Fantastic, fantastic. There's not much time left. So I would also go to Mr. Passu. But before that, would you recite a poem, Mr. Acharya? Please recite a poem. Because many of your poems
Let me recite one poem from my book. You know, this is it's called Loving My Father More.
Okay.
So this is how it goes. It was a sultry evening air with the sun going red. I saw my old man sitting on his old wooden chair. I couldn't say what he was up to, but he smiled and went on rolling something. I kept on playing with my dog. Then he called me up to him. Say, boy, you take a drag too. I sucked on the roll like a candy. I don't know what happened, but after a drag or two, I thought I loved my father more.
Wonderful.
You know, this poem is about, interestingly, this poem is about smoking a joint with my dad.
Okay. Mr. Passu, you have been a pioneer. You have been a pioneer in blogging in Bhutan. So how does blogging in Bhutan helps to motivate and promote writers?
I actually, I'm not so much of a pioneer. But I don't remember anybody writing blogging so prominently before. So therefore, I can take the credit sometimes. But
because you have written a wonderful Passu diary.
Yeah,
Passu diary.
Because I was getting trained as an IT teacher, computer teacher, and it was part of my requirement for my syllabus. So I was doing it, and that is how I happened to be one of the first bloggers. And back then, when we started, there were at least 2 dozens of bloggers, and we had a community, a very warm community, but over the years, everybody some got married, some went for studies, and everybody actually made the big shift in their life, and they forgot blogging. And because I was here in Bhutan ever since, and I never moved anywhere, and when I started blogging, I was already married. So therefore, my marriage and my becoming a father, everything just gave me stories to write. So therefore, it didn't change. So I actually stood the test of time, In fact, I grew as a blogger, and I had a fan following also. So a lot of people, young people, just followed. And what it does to young people is the ability to publish your work right away. That is the charm. When I was in high school, and I would write short stories, and I would post it to our newspaper, Kunsal, and if I got lucky, my short story is good enough, then Kunsal will publish it in their weekly newspaper, and that means waiting for that for 2-3 weeks, and finally they will publish it. So that much difficult was publishing and getting your work in some form of print, or getting your work read by a lot of people. But then blogging happened, and then suddenly you can just write a good story or a bad one, no problem, and you'll get readership right away. So that was the thing. And because I was one of the foremost bloggers, a lot of people just left blogging. I could not leave because I somehow felt the burden of being that pioneer, like you said, and I
Yes.
thought I just can't leave it. So therefore, I co-founded community of Buddhist bloggers, and then the first question any young blogger will ask is, how do I get more readers like you? They'll say, and I cannot give them a convincing reply because I have to tell them, write more stories, write stories that will matter, so that people will just look for that story. Even Google will list your blog, and then you get readership. But that is not something that they want to hear, And the second question is, how do you make money out of blogging? And which I tell them, I don't know, because I don't make money out of my blogging. So therefore, we, as a community of Buddhist bloggers, we started having conference, teaching young bloggers how to write stories of interest, how to even going into how to get readers, how to make money if it interests them, and finally creating an app whereby all Buddhist bloggers are put together on that app, and no matter how old a blogger you are or a younger blogger you are, you get equal readership because of that app, because that app will just update any blog from Bhutan, and then you'll be read. But of course, it over time, again, nothing picks up so well in Bhutan. I don't know why. We lack that consistent passion. So the community fell apart. They went again for here and there, and I'm in the process of rebuilding that community at the moment. Because this lockdown, we are under lockdown in Bhutan. This is giving us a lot of time to rethink our strategies, and we are now thinking of rebuilding community of Bhutanese bloggers. Yeah.
I would ask one question to Madam Choden, that this rich Bhutanese culture, I believe, show resemblances with other South Asian countries. Because the reason is they share the Tibetan culture and Mahayana Buddhism. That's in Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and Ladakh. Do the Bhutanese culture resemble with other South Asian countries?
I cannot hear you.
Okay. Do the rich Bhutanese culture resemble with other South Asian countries?
I cannot hear you.
Okay. Should I say once again?
I do. We can hear you. I think there is a connection problem between two of you.
Okay. Ma'am, can you hear me now?
Somebody who heard the question can answer. I cannot hear.
Okay, you cannot hear me now?
Maybe Sir Gopi can answer that.
Yeah. I just want to say that, this Bhutanese culture, I probably show resemblances with South Asian countries because, they share the Tibetan culture and Mahayana Buddhism. Am I right?
You see, yes, there would be resemblances. Why not? Because, I think the parent source, in Bhutan, we practice Mahayana Buddhism, that is mainstream, religion. Yes, of course, we do have, a lot of Tibetan Buddhist masters in the past came to Bhutan to spread Buddhism, to teach Buddhism. And the same masters also visited other areas, For example, one of our, most revered saints, Guru Padmasambhava, at that time was from India, right? He went to Tibet. He taught Buddhism there. Then he traveled to Bhutan. So you see, there is a link, obviously, in terms of Buddhism. Buddhism is our common link. Like you said, Sikkim was a Buddhist nation. Ladakh, obviously, Buddhism. And the whole of South Asia, if you look at Sri Lanka, has a Theravada, right?
Turn off your video, maybe it'll
Then
help.
we have Zen Buddhism in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. I think
Yeah,
Buddhism is the link in South Asia and also Southeast Asia for that matter.
Just
But
right
in terms of culture,
just
I
right
think,
the keyboard
in
clicker.
terms of
I'm right. I cannot
culture,
hear you guys. I
think
cannot hear
we
you.
have a very distinct Bhutanese culture. If you look at our food, very distinct. The way we eat, our chilies and cheese, the food cuisine is very totally different from what they eat in Ladakh and Sikkim. Maybe it's only the momos that are getting divided together, you see?
Yeah.
Because momo is a Halloween food, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of music, I think it's a little different. You might again find some similarity. Thematic similarities. A lot of our songs are about our teachers, about the Buddhist values.
I don't know why.
So you might find thematic interconnections. If you look at our dress, Bhutanese dress is again very distinct, but you might see some semblance again, you see, to the Tibetan, chuba. You see. So yes, I would say that there are, I think, interconnections. But if you look at as a body, Bhutan as a body of its own, language, culture, tradition, it's pretty distinct, and that is what the idea of gross national happiness. One of the pillars of gross national happiness is our distinct heritage that we want not only to preserve but promote. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Such an enriching discussion. I came to know many things about Bhutanese literature, Tibetan culture, Dzongkha language, and many other things. So I'm so enriched. So Asian Literary Society expresses extreme gratitude towards our distinguished guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.